Welcome to another episode of Your Money, Your Mission, the podcast where we break down complex financial situations into actionable advice. Powered by Johnson Financial Group. I'm your host, Kelly Mould, and today we're going to discuss the growing aging population in our country and the increasing demand for senior care services. We'll explore the challenges families face and the importance of professional guidance in making informed decisions. Joining me today is Jennifer Eastman, owner of Assisted Living Locators. She is also a certified senior advisor. Thanks so much for being with me today, Jennifer.
Thank you, Kelly, for having me.
So I'm so delighted to talk to you today because I know one of the things many of my clients face and many of our listeners face is the complex decisions when you have a loved one who is aging and needs additional assistance. And we know that this isn't an uncommon experience. From the research that we have seen, even in Wisconsin, the population that is going to be age 65 and older is expected to grow by 40% over the next decade. We also know that especially during the pandemic, but even post-pandemic, we have a situation where many, many individuals are providing care to these aging loved ones. They're also working jobs, raising families of their own, and it's becoming a significant crisis in time and energy and the right care for these individuals because folks are stretched so thin. So when we look at this, I know one of your goals is to try to help families navigate this very complex situation. Can you share with me a little bit about the kinds of things that you do in your role?
Sure. Yeah. I like to kind of share with, and mostly I'm working with the adult children.
Okay.
I'm kind of like the matchmaker.
Okay.
So I help match up the seniors with the appropriate care needs. So whether that is assisted living, memory care, home care, or, even skilled nursing.
So I imagine you find sometimes that identifying what that need is can be a little difficult. I know that in some cases, people are living alone and they may have been very healthy and competent and engaging and really someone that you wouldn't really think had any needs at all, but they're living alone. So sometimes it's hard to gauge if there have been things that have started to fail and they need some different assistance. I've also seen where married couples, where the spouse may be filling in a lot, and so the magnitude of the need is sometimes hard for family, especially the adult children, to really understand. Do you run across that much?
Very, often. Sometimes it will be the passing of one of the parents, and then they'll realize that,
Right.
Their mother or their father is definitely, they're not in a position that they're able to provide that hands-on care that their spouse was providing. And I also saw, coming out of the pandemic where a lot of us were more harboring at home, including our seniors, that the adult children weren't seeing their parents as much or don't live, in this area and are not able to see the decline. Our seniors, most of them have such a great ability to really put on their game face, whether they're with their adult children or with their doctors. So it is hard to see when it's the appropriate time to start having those conversations and making some decisions.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because I know that I've heard this throughout the media, but that we're experiencing this crisis of loneliness. And it occurs to me that the number of opportunities for us to socially engage have become much more limited, right? The malls of the 80s are gone. A lot of these opportunities to connect just aren't as readily available. And technology certainly has played a role in that. But there is some solid research that says this loneliness can contribute to some significant health declines, mental health, physical health, those kinds of things. What are you seeing in terms of folks living alone and the perception of, is that a good thing, a bad thing? I know that some people go, they've always been independent. They don't want to be in a situation where they're with strangers, so to speak. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, loneliness, social isolation, these are really serious, topics that are going on with seniors. And a couple things come into play for that. We're, maybe driving less. There's maybe not at availability.
Mm-hmm.
Senior centers have closed and
Mm-hmm.
maybe have not reopened yet. Or other avenues that, going to your job or
Mm-hmm.
different clubs, and maybe you played bridge with couples for decades, and then all of a sudden that group has disbanded, with your friends aging or things like that. So there is, unfortunately, through the pandemic, there's been a lot of studies on what this loneliness has done to seniors. And you hit the nail on the head. It's not only brain cognition decline, it's medical, health related issues, and this is something that's really important, and I think should continue to be a conversation that families are having with their seniors.
So when a family comes to you and they say we have concerns and maybe they admit, but we're not sure what the needs are. We don't really know what's needed here. How do you start to work with that client and figure out what the appropriate care options are?
Yeah, usually when an adult child will reach out to me, they really are at that pain point of, oh my gosh, where I know they're struggling and I don't know what to do anymore. Or, it's at more of a crisis situation where my father's in the hospital and is not able to be discharged home. So
Mm.
there's those scenarios that, and how I usually start is having a good conversation with the
Mm.
family,
Okay.
usually 45 minutes an hour, and learn about what's going on. And
Hmm.
those would be areas like medically, what's going on, what type of assistance do they need with their ADLs, which is activities of daily living. So that
Okay.
would be medication management, dressing, bathing, housekeeping, meals provided, and other care that could be on there as well, like, getting assistance in standing up from your chair, or even, assistance to meals or things like that. And then we're looking at the budget and
Okay.
looking at their financials,
Okay.
location. Sometimes, seniors want to be right here in their hometown, or
Okay.
maybe that's time to make that move closer to some of their adult children.
Okay.
And then also that part of culture, looking at what would be a good fit for the senior. Are they
Mhm.
super extroverted and would love a large, community with lots of activities, or would that just not be a good fit for them? Would a smaller community that had more of that sense of closeness would be more important?
What do you find are the most significant concerns of the client, the person who is facing the decline, may still be very competent, but needs that assistance? What kinds of things are you really sensitive that they're commonly concerned about?
Right. I think first of all, it's that sense of loss, that sense of losing your independence,
Hmm.
that fear of moving. This is a huge another transition
Hmm.
that's happening in our lives when we're older, and that fear am I going to like it there?
Hmm.
I think that's often, and then one of the benefits of here in the state of Wisconsin with assisted living, usually it's a month to month lease. So that
Mm.
can be that reassurance that if this really was not a good fit for whatever reason, you don't have to stay. You can put
Hmm.
your 30-day notice in and find another place.
And do you find that people have some misconceptions about what assisted living is really like? I know that 20 years ago, what it was like to go into a care facility might have been a little different than what it is today. So tell me a little bit about what you see in terms of people being able to get that care, but still have a relatively independent and kind of positive, engaging lifestyle.
Yeah, I think often, what I'm even sharing with families and seniors is let's just go and tour. I think you're going to be surprised.
Okay.
We talk about long gone are the days of our grandparents' nursing home kind of environment where everybody's
Right.
lined up in the hallway in their wheelchairs, and it, doesn't really smell very well.
Yeah.
Assisted living is really, the philosophy is that they're allowing you to be as independent as possible, and then they fill in the gaps and your care needs. So you're going to have your own space, your own studio apartment, or maybe even a larger one bedroom space. But then there's all these community spaces as well. And this is your house though. This is your room, and everybody coming in are more the guests. So the caregivers, things like that.
Okay.
That's kind of the philosophy. And be very surprised, and especially a lot of the newer ones being built. They're being built for a younger generation coming up. So they're definitely looking more like a nice hotel, and less like a nursing home.
Yes, and I noticed that the music has changed. It's kind of the music I was listening to, which is a little unsettling here and there as well. But it certainly is changing and becoming more contemporary with more activities because of a more, I think, maybe active retirement period. Even when you need some assistance, there's still more you can participate in.
There's a newer one that was built in Wisconsin that has a golf simulator right in the building. So. Yeah, movie theaters, spa,
Okay.
places for get your hair done right there. Some of them maybe will have, if they allow pets and small dogs, they have little stations for you to be able to give your dog a bath.
Mhm.
So they're really trying to find ways to make sure that you're living your best life there.
So when we talk about the family, oftentimes the family's recognizing a need. They don't necessarily know how to have that conversation. Do you have any tips for families on how to start to engage in this conversation?
Yeah, I think, part of my role is to help families, seniors and families navigate through this senior care. And a big part of that is kind of encouraging and helping provide that support. I think these are very hard conversations to have. And,
Hmm.
I have a lot of compassion to start these conversations, but they're so important. And
Hmm.
it's really just being honest and coming in with, maybe, I had to have a conversation with one of my parents and started it with, I'm very sorry, but this is where we're at. So it's coming in with compassion and connection.
Hmm.
Oftentimes I will ask, what's their why? Sometimes it is making sure their spouse is going to be taken care of, particularly the men of this generation.
Hmm.
So if they're kind of struggling on, both of them moving into assisted living, finding out what their why is and really focusing on that. Well, Dad, if something would happen to you or you were hospitalized, mom's going to be taken care of and she's going to be able to get the support that she needs. And then to continue to have those conversations. And I call them sometimes the tour of hope. Get out there and see a couple assisted livings. Oftentimes we'll have the senior go back maybe for lunch,
Hmm.
meet some folks there,
Hmm.
but really make sure that they are part of this conversation
Hmm.
as much as they can be. And
Right.
even if they do have dementia, it is important when the time is appropriate to have these conversations and allow them to be a part of this, major life change that they're having.
What do you see are some of the things where families maybe misstep in trying to do this? My personal experience is I've had clients who decided that, well, all the kids would be together at Christmas, so this would be a good time to have the conversation, which is not a good time to have the conversation. What other kinds of things should family be mindful of?
Yeah, I think you're spot on about that. Plus, it's kind of a gang up.
Right.
Oftentimes, I've been used as kind of that buffer.
Yeah.
I really like to come in if I'm working directly with the seniors with a lot of compassion. I'll often say, "Hey, my role is not to convince you to move, and
Right.
just for let them know I'm here to provide resources." I think maybe a couple of siblings to come or one on one more. And just to start those conversations and to share your concern and worry. I
Hmm.
think sometimes those are the things that we don't talk about, and to getting those supports.
Hmm.
But sometimes it's a lot easier coming for me because I'm not part of the family
Right.
dynamics,
Right.
and that I can maybe say things that maybe some of the adults. So sometimes I'm the one that's involved in those family meetings and really just try to educate, but to provide hope and kind of have some fun, right? Have some
Right.
fun while we're touring and things.
Right. So I would imagine that we're talking about situations right now where the individual that's needing the assistance is probably in a more dire situation where they need the assistance. They have to tour the facilities. There's a need today. But I would imagine that there are situations where people can anticipate that we're all going to age. We all will likely need some assistance in our daily life cares at some point. We're all living longer, well, most of us, right? Like with medicine and technology, that's changing. So, what kind of advice would you have for folks on anticipating this and maybe doing some planning or maybe thinking about having these conversations before somebody has to make it for you?
Right. And that's often what I'll say is, start early, start maybe creating some of those long term plans. Because otherwise, if you're in the hospital and you are not able to be discharged home, some of those decisions are out of your hands. First of all, we're looking at who's got availability. And right, you're not able to tour and do things like that.
Mhm.
So, and I think too, sometimes I've had clients that we start with just having that initial conversation, and then the next week, somebody fractured their elbow,
Mhm.
and that timeline that was going to be 6 months just moved up. But thank goodness we already had those conversations with her mother so that when we can start moving quickly, we really felt we knew what was going to be in her best interest and where she was going to go to thrive. One of the the kind of the cons of starting early and then putting those plans will have to change and
Right.
ever be flowing because
Right.
there are different licenses in the state of Wisconsin for assisted living, and that's part of my role is to kind of discern where is a good place for you. Is it more of the assisted living light apartment style or that higher level of assisted living that's just a step down from skilled nursing? So it's kind of, putting a couple irons in the fire, so to speak.
Okay.
Maybe you want to start with home care first coming in the home. But and then being able to make sure to always be flexible and knowing that things may have to change pretty quickly.
So do you see that as a common thing where people start with maybe some home care assistance and then it graduates to more assisted care and then moves and transitions to the more comprehensive care? That's good.
Yeah, I think ideally that's probably a good plan. If
Uh-huh.
I meet with the seniors in their home, I do look at the home.
Okay.
Is it well maintained? Are they, keeping care of some of them their biggest asset
Okay.
financially,
Okay.
and making sure that that's working out for them.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I really like to protect those dollars to have those be used towards their assisted living care, and making sure that financially it's the right time as well. Because if they're really dipping into their savings
Mhm.
to sustain their house, then
Mhm.
those conversations maybe need to happen sooner. Home care also, can for 24-hour care at your home, $14,000 a month, whereas assisted living could be half of that.
Mhm. That's significant. So do you find that the financial conversation is the one you have the first so that they can understand the options they have within those parameters, those financial parameters?
Most definitely. It has to be part of that first conversation, because that can really change what that should look like. And
Okay.
if somebody needs to, work with the ADRC to apply for Medicaid right away, or, so I know what type of finances, what dollars they have to spend towards assisted living to make sure I'm making a good fit for them.
Along those lines, I'll share with you. I had a client I was so proud of. They were in their 80s and they had come to the decision that they were in good health, but they anticipated that things were starting to change, and so they decided to sell the family home that they had lived in for more than 60 years. Which I'm sure you've experienced what an emotional thing that is to where all your memories were to make that change, but they decided to do that, and their motivation was making it easier for their children and allowing to have control over the places they were visiting, the type of care they would get. And so they moved into that, the apartment kind of uh, setup that will ultimately provide more assistance as they age, and up to skilled nursing at a certain point. And it was very important to them that they made those decisions, that they communicated that with their children, and that they went a step further and made sure the children knew that their powers of attorney for healthcare and finance were in place, having the conversation with the agents they took, and really expressing what their wishes were while they are in good health to be able to do that. Is that, I mean, I know that's ideal and it's not as common as we would hope it would be, but I viewed that as such a tremendous sacrifice and gift to their children to be able to do that, early, and knowing that that was an emotional decision for them to make, but that it likely has made it much easier for them and their children to feel comfortable about the support they were getting. Have you seen much of that, or do people talk about how to plan for that?
That's probably not as common
Hmm.
for the role that I do, but I
Hmm.
also would say that that couple has gained a lot because they no longer have that burden of a house and all that household, whether you're cutting the grass or not, you're having to hire those things, all
Hmm.
the upkeep of that. There's stairs or whatever, and they're also gaining, quite frankly, a really big social life. My daughter once called assisted living communities a cruise ship on land. So we like to say that, so you're gaining a lot when you're doing that move as well. Um, I don't know what percentage of my families are in that bucket, but quite probably not very many. Most of them, we're kind of that's probably why my role exists, as
Uh,
we're kind of behind a little bit, and we're getting caught up the best that we can, and
right.
and I can help, get them the resources, making sure those POAs are in place before they can't be, and making sure we can, kind of get everything organized and moving forward, providing um, resources for the home as well. And senior moving services, which are a great product for seniors to
Hmm.
use, and
So
things
tell
like
me
that.
what kinds of things the senior moving services does.
Yeah. So unlike the rest of us, when we move, we pack up our whole house, we move it to the next location. With seniors, we pack up the senior moving services. They will come and meet with the senior, find out what they want to take with to their assisted living apartment. They do all the measurements, the floor plans. They come in and pack up only the things you're taking with. They bring them to the assisted living apartment, unpack them, even put their pictures on the walls. They put everything away. So basically, your 80 something year old, 90 something year old seniors turn the key and they walk right in.
Yeah.
And just really takes a lot of the stress outside of the moving, which is very stressful for all of us. And then they have the peace of mind of knowing that I actually had a client that brought way too many lamps. So we could return some of them back to the house. Or there were some things maybe you realized you wanted to take. And then at that point, then you can maybe have the estate sale, and sell the
Hmm.
house and do things like that. So that's the senior moving services, which is really a good product and really takes a lot of the stress off of the family and the seniors as well.
What a wonderful service. And I do believe my clients actually use that,
That's
because
good.
I remember them sharing with me how comforting it was for them to walk in and see familiar things in the new apartment, have it almost feel like home
Yeah.
when they walked in the door. So, what a wonderful service that is for folks to have. Um, you mentioned powers of attorney, and I think that's such an important thing to talk about. You also mentioned the financial planning, and we do a lot of financial planning for clients. And in fact, one of the things that we recommend when I'm reviewing financial plans with clients is to make sure that they're stressing their plan with a healthcare event, with some need for either long term or temporary assistance through a care facility, to make sure that their financial plan, what it will allow, and how it works out. I also encourage clients to take a look at their POAs and estate planning at least every 5 years. And you and I were talking earlier about powers of attorney. Those are so critical. And I think it's probably warrants us talking about why they're so critical and what happens in the alternative. And I know one of the things that's hard for people to do is think about, okay, what happens when I can't make decisions? If you have a power of attorney for healthcare and for finance, I think one of the beauties of those documents is you decide who can stand in and make decisions as you would were you able to. Powers of attorney for finance, you have your agent able to make those decisions even if you weren't incompetent. You might, in fact, there's a situation where my mother was traveling and she wanted to buy her retirement home and the closing had to happen. So I was able to go in and make sure those arrangements were made while she was traveling. But to have someone that's trusted, that can stand in for you, make healthcare decisions, make financial decisions, is so critical. And you get to decide who that is, and you get to decide the length at which they go to. They stand in your shoes. Without those documents, and I know you've experienced this, families are really at a loss. They don't have the authority to make those decisions. And so then the next step becomes a guardianship. And that becomes a much different situation where you actually lose your rights to do things. They're no longer necessarily standing in your shoes to do what you would do. They now have to do what is ever in your best interest. So do you see families that are maybe don't have those documents in place or don't understand that or are really stuck with no other alternative than to go to court and have the guardianship? Have you seen those circumstances at all?
Oh, most definitely. And I think every conversation I have with anybody, we talk about those POA for finance and healthcare. As soon as your children turn 18, you should have those POA for healthcare.
100%.
We should all have one. So I try to kind of preface it like that too. So it's not just for the seniors.
No.
Sometimes the seniors feel like, oh, I'm losing control. And that's kind of a topic that, kind of goes along with this in my mind is if there is some financial fraud, that's another thing that the POA for finance can help because you can kind of get in there and act on their behalf for things like that.
Right.
And most definitely is an easier path if those POA documents, even if you're not engaged, you're able to bring those to the bank and be able to make those decisions, especially if we're moving quickly into assisted living. You may not be able to have access to their finances to pay for that first month or two. So most definitely. And I think going along with that is having those conversations. So if something would happen and you have a horrible diagnosis like dementia, that you've had those conversations because I see family members really fretting and struggling with what's the right thing to do. What would they want? What would they have wanted me to do? But to have those documents in place is paramount to really aging successfully.
I would agree 100%. Any final tips that you would have for families that are trying to navigate this and make sure their loved one is protected and happy? What should people be thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's really we're looking at all these different seasons of life, and it's allowing our parents to age and to age gracefully and safely, and sometimes that doesn't happen in their house. So, but it's not preaching at them or talking at them, but really allowing them to come to the table and to have these conversations and be able to share your concerns. But we talk about it, assisted living locators, where compassion meets, expertise. But that's really, I think, what the game is using compassion and understanding, going again with their whys, but really making sure they know you're on the team with them and not, as a threat coming in to take their independence away from them.
Right.
But sometimes I don't know why always winning means that you're staying home, even though you're lonely and maybe not getting good nutrition anymore. But winning to me is living your best life, no matter what age you are at or where your abilities are as well. So, but yeah, and I think also for the adult children is to find resources like myself to, even if it's just a quick conversation and kind of give you the support and maybe help frame what's going on and some of those conversations that they should have.
I know folks are probably thinking, okay, that's great, Jennifer, but that's probably really expensive too if I call you and get this help. What does that mean for a family that's looking for this kind of support?
Yeah, great question. So my services are actually a free community service. So, and I do, I own my own business. We really focus on the senior. And like I mentioned, sometimes it is just a quick phone call and that's all that's needed. Otherwise, we go through the whole process. And that even entails me setting up the schedule for touring of assisted livings. We tour with them and really stay with you through that whole process. But that is, that's the exciting part of it. It's a free community service.
And one of the things that your organization does, though, is also spend some time looking at these facilities, right? You do a lot of the legwork for the families to know a facility that's well staffed, that's taking good care of the residents. That's part of what you do as well. So
yeah, most definitely. And I think especially with I have a lot of business background and experience. So we're really looking at the assisted living communities in southeastern Wisconsin, looking at their mission, vision, and values, their leadership. Has it changed?
Mm.
When, we love touring with our families, and I think that's such a great support for them, but it also gets us in these assisted living communities a lot,
Mhm.
which is important as well.
Mhm.
How do the seniors look? Do they look like they're thriving?
Mhm.
How does the staff look?
Mhm.
So those are the things that are helpful. And, and I have try to have good relationships with assisted living communities and make sure that our partnership is win-win for both of us as well.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We really appreciate this. And thanks to all of you who have joined us today. Hopefully, this is helping you as you think about senior care and the challenges families face. And thanks for tuning in. If you have questions you'd like us to tackle, please go to the show notes, type your question, and hit submit. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of Your Money, Your Mission, the podcast designed to turn complex financial situations into actionable advice, powered by Johnson Financial Group.
This podcast is not a recommendation to buy or sell any investment or financial products. Whether a particular investment or financial solution is right for you depends on the facts of your particular situation. Please consult your own professional advisors prior to taking any action based on the content of this podcast. Wealth management services are provided through Johnson Bank and Johnson Wealth Incorporated, Johnson Financial Group companies. Additional information about Johnson Wealth Incorporated, a registered investment advisor, and its investment advisor representatives is available at advisorinfo.sec.gov. Investment products are not insured by FDIC, are not deposits, and may lose value.